Hi everyone, and welcome to our Woodlot and Forest Management Virtual Workshop. My name is Linda Zavik and I'm the MEP Technician for Kalamazoo County. If anyone is familiar with MEP, you probably think it is geared to traditional agricultural farms. However, about 5 years ago, an additional system was added to the program, and that's the Forest, Wetland, and Habitat System. Before I get too ahead of myself, though, I'll back up a little and provide you with a brief history of the program. You may see the signs around the county in front of large farms, small hobby farms, and even forested land. Let me tell you about what they are all about. MEP stands for the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program. MEP is available for all types of farms, and that's one thing we have in Kalamazoo, diversity in agriculture. We work with any type of farm, no matter what the size. So when did MEP start? We need to go back to the late 1990s when agricultural commodity groups had a vision of creating an environmental program where they could show that they were being proactive by getting ahead of any future regulation. The program does not mandate how farmers farm or what they need to do. Rather, the program provides the best management practices to protect soil and groundwater. The program also helps develop farmer-friendly practices to protect the environment. In 1998, the MEP program had taken root by agricultural commodity groups and farms partnering with state lawmakers. This program has evolved over the years to meet the needs of farmers in the state. The first farm was officially verified in 2002. The first farm to get all three systems verified was right here in Kalamazoo County. So what does it mean to be verified? That means that the farm has met all of the qualifications outlined in the program for that particular system. Many of the requirements are state and federal law, and others are best management practices to protect soil and groundwater. In 2011, MEP was signed into law. What that did is it guaranteed that farmers that are enrolled in the program have certain regulatory protections and advantages. In 2018, the program reached the 5,000 verification milestone goal. Currently, there are over 5,650 verifications in the state of Michigan, and that number is growing daily. The program has been a huge success, and other states across the country are trying to replicate the program. Of course, farms come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. MEP offers recognition in a range of categories. You can seek recognition in just one of them or all of them. It's really up to you. There are currently 4 systems available for MEP verification: the farmstead, cropping, livestock, and the newest system, the forest, wetland, and habitat system. And that's what we're going to mostly talk about today. By getting your property MEP verified in the forest, wetland, habitat system, you're playing a positive role in the protection and sustainable management of our natural resources. The MEP management requirements in the Forest, Wetland, and Habitat Assessment are aligned with state and federal environmental regulations, the Michigan Right to Forest Practices, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, Sustainable Soil and Water Quality Practices in Forest Land, and the American Forest Foundation Tree Farm Sustainable Forestry Certification Standards. So how do you get started? The first thing you can do is contact the MEP technician in your county and complete a forest, wetland, and habitat system. Once you complete that assessment, you'll determine what management and record-keeping changes, if any, will be needed for your forest management system to be environmentally assured through MEP. Once the landowner develops and implements a forest management plan to address the risks, they can move forward with verification. The bottom line is you will need to have a forest management plan completed in order to get environmentally verified through the forest, wetland, and habitat system. The Forest, Wetland, and Habitat Assessment addresses 5 different land use sections. It addresses sustainable non-agriculture land management, forestry, wetlands, both forested and non-forested, if you have that on your property, and water management, non-forested upland habitat, and any other environmental risks that are part of your forest, wetland, and habitat system. So why move forward with MEEP verification? Well, you can earn recognition as a top steward in the community. You're provided regulatory assurances. You get increased access to cost share and technical assistance, and you have an enduring sense of accomplishment and pride. MEEP verification will protect landowners from nuisance lawsuits and show their neighbors that they are good stewards of the land. Having a sign on your property will also raise awareness of the program and encourage others to move forward with a land management plan. Like I've said before, you need a forest management plan to move forward with the MEEP program. You'll hear from Daishan Melbert from NRCS. He's the district conservationist, and he'll talk about how you can get a plan through NRCS and the Farm Bill. You can also get a plan through the Forest Stewardship Program, and we'll have more information about that coming up in a couple other talks. Again, if you have any questions, call the Kalamazoo Conservation District and we can point you in the right direction and help you out as needed. A couple of parting thoughts. If a landowner has completed a forest management plan, the requirements for MEEP verification for this system are generally met. The goal of the program is to increase the number of landowners and acres that are managed under sustainable land management plans. Keep in mind that MEEP is 100% voluntary. You make the ultimate decision about what practices to adopt based on what makes sense for your business and your property. If you are interested in working towards MEEP verification, make sure you are registered for this program. MEEP is a 3-step process. The first step is completion of an improved educational session. This workshop fulfills that requirement. However, I do need record of your attendance. The second step is a field visit where we review the assessments, and then you move forward with completion of any items that are necessary to meet the MEEP program requirements. The third step is the on-site review and verification by the MEEP verifier. Thank you for attending our virtual workshop. If you would like more information about MEEP, go to the Kalamazoo Conservation District website at www.kalamazooconservation.org and look for the MEEP tab. There's also a tab on the website with all the forestry information that you'll learn about today. As always, feel free to call us at the Conservation District if you have any questions. I hope you enjoy the remainder of this workshop.
This is Karen High, the Parks Director for Ashtamo Township. I'd like to tell you about the forest management plan that was developed for Ashtamo's newest community park. I'm sorry that I won't get to show you the park in person, but I hope you enjoy this slideshow and the short video clips that we recorded on a windy fall day. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Elizabeth Rocho and Linda Zabik at the Kalamazoo Conservation District for hosting this virtual workshop. They're a wonderful asset to our community and a great resource for everyone that cares about conservation. First, some history of our unique property. In 1830, a covered wagon brought Benjamin and Mariah Drake and their children to this land. In 1831, when the U.S. government offered the land for sale, Benjamin Drake walked to the land office in White Pigeon to claim 80 acres. The family eventually expanded their farm to nearly 500 acres. The house that you see in this picture was built in 1882 after a previous home was destroyed by fire. Ashtamo Township purchased it from a developer in 2004 when it was slated for demolition. Here's an artist rendering of how the farm might have looked when the Drake family lived and farmed here. And another illustration. These are murals that were painted by local artist Conrad Kaufman. They're on display in the timber frame barn that was built last year. The Drake family lived and farmed here until the early 1900s. Later owners sold off land for development. By the time Ashtimo purchased the house, the area had changed drastically. This is a recent aerial photo. The area outlined in green is Drake Farmstead Park. It is 26 acres, and we're hoping to obtain the 5-acre drainage pond property to the west as well. As you can see, it's in a densely developed area. We're a short walk from shops, restaurants, and one of the most heavily used bus stops in the county. There are apartment complexes, senior living centers, a high school, and a dense residential neighborhood in walking distance. The location is very convenient for lots of potential park users. Thanks to our long tree-lined driveway and the huge berm built between our property and the shopping center to the south, visiting Drake Farmstead Park is like stepping back in time. In 2015, we invited the public to a series of workshops and meetings to discuss how to use the property. Consensus was to develop a new park that preserves the historic character and rural nature of the original farmstead. This is the park master plan that was developed. A couple of ideas that emerged from the workshop were to have a food forest, planting trees and shrubs that bear food for people and wildlife, and also a managed woodlot where we could demonstrate how to care for forested areas. Though we bought the house in 2004, we didn't acquire most of the property until a decade later. And we soon realized that we needed a plan to help us manage the park's natural areas. This aerial photo shows our property in more detail. Our forest management plan covers the area outlined in light purple. We applied for and received an urban and community forestry grant from the Department of Natural Resources to help pay for our forest management plan. This is the map that we included with our request for proposals. We eventually hired Dr. Hugh Brown, a natural resource consultant, recently retired from the Pierce Cedar Creek Institute, to develop our plan. This is a map that I mentioned later in a video clip. It's called Michigan Vegetation Circa 1800. It's available on the Michigan Natural Features Inventory website, which is listed below. It shows the plant communities that were present prior to European settlement. The approximate location of our site is outlined in red. It was at the edge of the Grand Prairie, shown in light yellow, oak savanna in darker yellow, and the beech maple forest in dark green. This is one of the resources used to create our forest management plan. Our plan divides our property into 6 management zones. This is also mentioned later in the video. There are unique recommendations for each zone. This has been one of the most helpful tools for us. Before I close the slideshow and start the video clips, I'd like to invite you to volunteer with us. As you can tell from this photo, our volunteers work hard, but they have a lot of fun. If you'd like to volunteer, please let me know. We'd love to have your help. You can contact me by email, and my email address is shown on the slide. Thank you.
We are out at the Drake Farmstead, which is on Drake Road in Ashtimo Township. Ashtimo Township is located on the northwest side of Kalamazoo, and we're here to meet with Karen High, who is the Ashtimo Township Director of Parks, and Linda Zabik, the MEP Specialist, to talk about the forest management plan and the history of the Drake Farmstead. Hi, I'm Karen High. I'm the Parks Director for Ashtimo Township. We're here at Drake Farmstead Park today, and I want to tell you a little bit about our forest management plan. We knew that we needed a forest management plan because our property had been farmed for generations, probably since 1830, and once farming was discontinued, we don't think there was any maintenance done for many years. And when we walked the site, we saw a lot of invasive species, but they were mixed in with really desirable species like pin oaks and walnuts. So we wanted a forest management plan that would help us identify the desirable species, and we were hoping for some rare and endangered species to boot. And we wanted to know where the invasive species were and the best way to remove those, and we needed a plan to guide us in maintaining and restoring the property in the future. We hired a qualified consultant to develop our forest management plan. We met with them on site several times, and they took a look at all of the species on our site, including the invasive species. They did a lot of background research, looking into the soils, the native plant communities that would have been here before European settlement. They even looked at old aerial photographs. During their site visits, they looked for signs of diseases and insects, and they used all that information and put together our forest management plan. The goals of our forest management plan are based on the public input that we received in 2015 when we did our park master plan. Our primary goal is to create a healthy woodland for recreational use and appreciation of nature. We also want our site to serve as a model for property owners that have forested lands that might want to improve them for sustainability reasons. What's been most helpful about our forest management plan is that it was divided into 6 management zones. Each zone has specific recommendations for what to plant and how to maintain it. It's allowed us to focus on one management zone at a time without getting overwhelmed, because this is a really long-term project for us. Even though we spent a lot of time, we've had a lot of volunteers out here helping, it'll be 20 years or more before we're able to really feel like we've completed our management plan. The first management zone that we've been focusing on is along the tree line driveway, and we put in an accessible trail, and we're getting ready to seed along both sides of the trail with a native mix of shade-tolerant wildflowers and grasses. Invasive species are a major problem for us on this site, and the primary concern are the black locust, which you can see in the background here. They're a clonal species, and in certain areas they have really taken over. So our primary goal starting out is to remove all the black locusts from the site. We hadn't planned to sell timber, but our forest management plan had a mention about the value of black locust posts for fence posts. So we were able to sell a few of those, and that helped offset some of our costs.
I met with Karen in 2017, and that's when they were talking about having a vegetable plot. And so we met and went through the pharmacist to get an idea of what were some of the things that they should think about moving forward with any type of cropping system operation. However, their plans evolved. The vegetable plot was put on the back burner, and they were implementing their forest management plan. So about a year later, I came out to the farm, and Karen and I reviewed the forest, wetland, and habitat assist to make sure that the forest management plan had all the necessary components required for meat verification. The plan did in fact have everything needed for meat verification, but there was one recommendation in the forest management plan that we decided to move forward on, and that was collecting some soil samples to look at the nutrient content of the soil. And so we collected the samples in December of 2018. We did it before the ground froze in December, and then we moved forward with meat verification in April of 2019.
As I mentioned in my PowerPoint presentation that you just listened to, you need to have a forest management plan in order to move forward with the forest, wetland, and habitat system meat verification. Daishan Melbert is going to talk about how you can get a forest management plan through the USDA Farm Bill programs. Daishan is the district conservationist in Kalamazoo County with NRCS. You'll also hear another way that you can work towards a forest management plan when Chris talks about forest management plans and the components of that. Chris is with Steinkraus Forestry Management, and we'll be out to a property and learn about a lot of the components of a forest management plan there. So if you have any questions though, please call the Conservation District. We can point you in the right direction and we can help you out as needed. Thank you.
My name is Daishan Melbert. I'm the District Conservationist for Kalamazoo County. Today I would like to discuss opportunities for non-industrial private forest land within NRCS. With most of the state's forest land privately owned, proper management of this resource is important. No matter how a landowner uses forest land, a forest management plan is essential. A forest management plan helps the landowner protect soil, water, and other wildlife resources, and identifies other threats such as invasive species and disease. A forest management plan is designed to optimize the resources that are important to the landowner, be it specific game species, sustainable timber production, or general recreation. Once a forest management plan is in place, it opens the door for further EQIP financial assistance for the implementation of the conservation practices detailed in the plan. Financial assistance for forest management plans are available through an NRCS program called EQIP. EQIP is Environmental Qualities Incentives Program. This program provides financial and technical assistance to agricultural producers to address natural resource concerns and deliver environmental benefits such as improved water and air quality, conserved ground and surface water, increased soil health and reduced soil erosion and sedimentation, improved or created wildlife habitat, and mitigation against drought and increasing weather volatility. Applying for a forest management plan through EQIP is a very simple process. First, you need to acquire a farm and tract number through Farm Service Agency. Then, you need to complete an EQIP application with NRCS. If you give me a call, I'll be able to send you one through email. We can schedule an appointment or traditional mail. With this application, you will need to complete the eligibility documentation. That shows that you are compliant with highly erodible land and wetland regulations, and you meet our adjusted gross income requirements. Then NRCS will do a site evaluation. After that, your application is complete. If approved for a forest management plan through EQIP, the cost share dollar amount is based off of the total amount of acres of your site. A forest management plan through EQIP is a one-year contract. Once you have the forest management plan written, your contract and obligation to NRCS is complete. Then you can implement the forest management plan on your own or return to NRCS for more technical and financial assistance implementing the forest management plan. Below are some common practices recommended through a forest management plan that NRCS has cost share for. Another option for non-industrial private forest landowners are fish and wildlife habitat plans. A fish and wildlife habitat plan is a site-specific plan developed for a client who is ready to plan and implement decisions with consideration for fish and wildlife habitat and other biological resources. If you have any questions about a fish and wildlife habitat plan, please contact the office and we can discuss that option further.
I'm Jeff Steinkraus, owner of this property. 20 acres we have here. There's about 10 acres of woods, and we planted 6.5 acres of a CRP windbreak, glorified windbreak back in the day before it was three rows wide. And today we're going to talk a little bit about forest management and management plans. And this is my staff forester, Christy Holster. Introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, my name is Chris. I actually live up in Kalamazoo, so I kind of work up in the Kalamazoo area. I've been working for Jeff now for about 8 years now.
So I've owned the property since 2000, and since I'm a forester, I have my plan in my head. And one day it dawned on me that if I die, my wife wouldn't really know what to do with the property, so wouldn't do her any good with what's in my head. So I thought I probably should put that in writing. And so this year, after 20 years, we finally got around to doing that. We did have a plan for the tree planting, but not for the woods per se. My unofficial plan was to do a harvest approximately every 10 years. When we bought the land, there were several red elms in the woods, and they were all dying from the Dutch elm disease. So I thought it was a good idea to salvage those trees at that time. And this woods has quite a few young walnut trees, as well as quite a bit of sugar maple. And so my goal was to grow the walnut trees up to around 24 or 26 inches in diameter. Approximately 5 years after the first harvest, we had a storm went through up on this hill and took out about 10 of my walnut trees. So I had to change plans a little bit and do a salvage harvest. And so we did that sale around 2010, I guess. First one was around 2003, second one was 2010. And then this past year, we decided to go ahead and sell some of the walnuts that were getting close to that 24 inch, and I had one that got hit by lightning, so that made me a little nervous. And we had a few other ones that had some other damage. So we've done 3 harvests in this woods already since 2000. So this is a sandy loam type of soil. So certain trees grow well on some soil types. This one tends to grow good walnut because it's well drained, but still has some loam, so it holds the moisture. Walnut tend to like to grow the best on gravelly soil, sandy loam soil. They'll grow on a lot of variety of soils, but that's where they do the best. And then when you have sugar maple, usually that's a pretty good site indicator that it's a little better than average on the soil types. If it was all black oak and soft maple, then that usually tells you that it's a pretty sandy site and not as productive. And not all species will grow on that kind of soil.
So what we want to talk about today is really forest management plans and why they're important and why someone would even bother to get one written. So basically what it comes down to is when you have a forested piece of property, it's nice to have a goal or an objective to shoot for with your woods, whether that's for family legacy, whether that's for invasive species, whether it's for timber management, whether it's for aesthetics. There's a whole list of things that everybody's goals for their property are different. Most people have it for hunting or recreation, something along those lines. So it's good to get all of that outlined in a plan, and that way you have something to actually follow and get executed, so that things don't get just pushed down the road, whether it be 1 year or 10 years later, saying, wish I had done that. It also serves as a good record. So, when somebody asks you, when you call a forester and they ask you when was the last time something was done, you're not kind of guessing whether it's 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So it's good just to have a written record of everything you've done with your property. And it also serves kind of as a key to get involved in a lot of programs, which we'll touch with later, to address things like invasive species and timber management and those types of things.
So when I wrote my plan, since we already had 3 harvests, I had put that detail in my plan. So going forward, if this plan gets passed on to the next owner, they'll know what's happened in the past. And being a forester, and I measured every single tree in this woods at one point, 12 inches and larger. And the walnuts, I had actually numbered them, and I was keeping track of how much they have grown. And they were growing an average of about 3.5 to 4 inches in diameter for 10 years, which is a pretty good growth rate for walnut. So our goals for this property is recreation, hunting, mainly timber production. Those first two were mostly for my wife, and she likes to come out here and walk around and get a break from work. But I also like to hunt, so I want to keep some diversity for deer hunting particularly. There was a couple of beech back here that I wasn't allowed to touch because my wife liked those. So even though they're not the most productive tree, I had to split my objectives with her, and that also gives diversity for the forest, though that's good too. So when you have a disease like the emerald ash borer that came through and took out 13 of the white ash trees, if we had a whole woods full of white ash, then they would have all been gone. We do have a couple of blue ash in this woods, and they are resistant to the emerald ash borer. And I've left those just to see how long they're going to live, and actually it is reproducing. So our next scheduled harvest will be in approximately 10 years when the walnuts get up to around, the remaining walnuts get up to about 24 inches in diameter. In the meantime, we burn firewood, so we have an outdoor wood boiler, so all these treetops that are left from this last harvest, I'll be cutting those up and utilizing those. And anything that was suitable for a log, I have a little portable wood miser, and I do little wood projects, so I mill some of my own lumber for that on occasion. But the walnut were far too valuable for me to use on my own. So. But one of the things that we think about as a forester is a grove of pawpaw like this. Doesn't have any commercial value as a tree, but it has some wildlife value. It is kind of a unique tree, so I did decide to cut them down once. I never treated them. I just wanted to see how thick they would come back, and you can see they come back vigorously, and I'm still not too sure what I'm going to do with them. I'm not going to let them spread anymore, but I'll probably just keep this clone here for a little while. It's fun to watch them, and they have really interesting flowers in the spring. Most years they have some fruit, but this year this particular grove didn't have any fruit. And then if there's undesirable species out here in the opening where there's a lot of sunlight, I will be taking those down. And that way there's a whole crop of new trees that'll come up. I expect to get sugar maple. There's already some ash here. Probably some elm, since there's elm around this opening. And I did actually plant a few white oak just for some diversity, since there's not much oak in this woods. So that's kind of our objectives for the property. How about yours?
And then I also own a property right outside of Kalamazoo County, pretty close to the Kalamazoo River. And the primary reason I had that plan originally written was actually to enroll in the Qualified Forest Program. So that property should now be enrolled in the Qualified Forest Program. But secondarily, I bought it mainly for recreation and hunting. And then it also has the full list of pretty much every invasive species you can think of out there. I know we've got some tree of heaven, buckthorn, oriental bittersweet, some burning bushes out there, glossy buckthorn. Trying to think if I'm missing one. Honeysuckle's out there. I think there's some autumn olive out there. So I've got a full list of stuff I've got to do with that property. And that's kind of high on the objective list as far as my management plan is to slowly try and curb the invasive species and also to manage it for timber. So it's a completely different woods than this one. It's primarily red maple and swamp white oak and bur oak. So it's more of a lowland site. It's got some floodings in it. Again, bought it mainly for recreation and managing the timber, but again, trying to keep the invasives under control, so when I do a harvest eventually, the whole woods doesn't just get taken over with buckthorn and oriental bittersweet and everything else that's in there and kind of choke out the remainder of the trees. So that was kind of my driving force of getting the plan written, is kind of, work towards making it a better woodlot and being able to hunt, obviously. So that's was my main goals for my forest management plan.
So to get a forest management plan, for instance, for the Qualified Forest Program, you have to have a degree in forest management in order to write that plan. And forester will ask questions about what you are owning the property for, what your long-term objective is. And that way the forester can help the landowner steer the woods to get to where you want it to be. If you just let it go and let it be natural, Like in Chris's situation, all the invasive species are going to take over and probably take out all the good trees, and you'll be left with a lot of junk. I happen to have a neighbor that has a lot of oriental bittersweet, so every year I'm monitoring this, looking for it, and I just found a new one today that I didn't know was there because it was caught up in the foliage of the tree that was grown in. So every year I take several trips around here, but I consistently look for invasive species. We found a couple of honeysuckle on the edges, had a couple tree of heaven when we first planted our trees out in the front. So it's important to vigorously inspect that, and if you don't know what you're looking for, there's several websites there's even apps on your phone that you can take a picture of it and identify it. But if you don't keep it under control, it will take over, and unfortunately the world we live in, seems like there's more and more invasive species all the time.
And the property I've got is definitely a good example of that. I know that woods hasn't been logged, and there's no evidence of logging, so it's been pretty much unmanaged for the history as far as I can tell. All of the ash obviously died out, and the invasive species are pretty much just taken off now. So without any management, it pretty much will be converted to some sort of an oriental bittersweet, tree of heaven, buckthorn woods at some point without any regeneration starting. So it's really important, that's again where that management plan comes into play, is to get an outline and a plan of how you're going to deal with these things, whether they're timber harvest or it's invasive species or whatever it might be, whatever your goals or objectives might be. It's kind of where that forest management plan comes into play. Now that we've covered kind of why you would want to get a management plan written, now kind of the next question would be, where do I find out how to get one written? Who do I contact to start the process? There's a lot of different sources you can go to. The state of Michigan has a list of qualified forest plan writers that are all qualified to write management plans. You can stop by your local NRCS office. They should also have a list they can give you. Any member of the Society of American Foresters or the Association of Consulting Foresters are also sources you can contact to find somebody that's qualified to come out to your property and meet with you and talk about your goals and kind of get you set up with a forest management plan. From there, you'd meet with the forester out in the woods, as we've mentioned before, and kind of have an idea of what your goals are going to be. And then you would meet with that qualified forester, and they could go over some of your options for getting a management plan written. And to back up a little bit, there's basically 3 management plans that is available for you to do. The state of Michigan has what they call their forest management plan. It's a partially covered plan. In other words, the cost share currently is $200, and they pay 50 cents an acre for the plan. So it covers a portion of the plan, and then you would be responsible to pay for the remainder of it. The NRCS program also, the NRCS office also has a program called the 106 management plan, and again, that's a forest management plan. And as far as management plans go, you don't necessarily need, there's a lot of different types of management plans, so I don't want to just focus on the forest part. You can also get nutrient management plans and wildlife management plans. It really comes down to your objectives and what you want to do with the woods. So you have the one through the state, which is the forest management plan, and the one through the federal, through the NRCS office, which is the 106, which is for the forest management plan. And that plan is basically a fully funded plan. So the 2 main differences between the 2 is the funding and then the time it's going to take for you to get that plan written. Through the state, that program, the partially funded one, we basically can write that plan anytime. So if you were to call us up on Monday and say we want a plan, we can really get that plan going that week. The other plan that's fully funded through the NRCS office, it's typically you're talking, kind of on a year cycle. You got to apply for the plan, and then you find out if you get the plan that next year. So everything's kind of that next year, however it is fully funded. Your third option, you can also meet with a qualified forester, and they can just write you a management plan. You don't need to go through the funding options. I guess what I would say is, and this comes down to your goals and why you write a management plan. if your main objective is to address invasive species, for instance, you would want to go through the NRCS program because there's cost share to cover that, controlling those types of things. You know, if you want to get into the qualified forest program, you'd want to likely go through the state because it's a quicker process. So in other words, if the qualified forest program deadline, as they'll talk about today, is September, so if you buy a piece of property in the spring and you want a management plan written for that, you really have to go through the state program. So hopefully it's not too confusing, but there's two, and that's where it's best to call a forester and kind of go over your objectives and what you want to do, because there's a lot of options available and cost share, differences between the plans. And in the end, the plans are all going to be good plans as long as it's through a qualified forester. They're going to have the same components to them, and really it just comes down to your objectives and what you want to do with it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Our plan has two main components. We have the woods, the existing woods, and then this is a tree planting, so I have this as a separate unit. And we separate the units because that's a lot larger than this, and this is not ready for any kind of harvesting yet, and won't be for another 10 years or so. So that way we could address each area separately. And this particular planting was done in 2002. I planted every other row with white pine as a trainer tree, site conditioner, wildlife tree. And then the hardwood rows are a mix of cherry and tulip in one row and red oak and walnut in the next row. And I have a couple scattered butternut and white oak just for some interest. But so eventually the white pine are going to be out competed by the hardwoods in most places, except a few areas where the deer ate the hardwoods and my oaks didn't survive. So a couple areas I got the pine that are out competing the hardwoods. For the most part, this design is to make the hardwoods taller and straighter, and that's my ultimate goal, is to have a nice hardwood forest. So in the plan, we did have a plan for this particular, and this was in the CRP program. Like I said, it was a windbreak program. If we didn't live on this property, since it's 20 acres, then we would be allowed to try and enroll in the qualified forest program. But since we were living here, we already have the homestead exemption, so there's no benefit, and you really can't even. Well, technically you could sign up for the qualified forest program, but you're only going to save 16 mills instead of the 18 that the homestead is. So if you have 20 acres or more, then and you don't live on it, then the qualified forest program is a good option.
So in closing, just so sometimes these programs can get a little confusing, and again, it's best to contact a forester, or like I said, stop at your local NRCS and talk to somebody and get an idea of what's available so that you know exactly what you're doing. But just in closing, the state, so there was 3 different plans that you can get written. The state has the forest stewardship program, and that's that partial cost share that I had mentioned, the $200 and the 50 cents an acre. The NRCS office, you can go through them, and they have the 106 forest management plan, and that's basically a fully funded management plan. And then that third option I also mentioned is you can not go through any of those programs, and you can just pay for a plan out of your pocket. And again, I would recommend going through a qualified forester to get that plan written, so that it actually meets all the criteria it's supposed to meet. And then, today Deshaun had talked about those NRCS programs, and these management plans would allow you to actually apply for those programs to get the cost share. And then Bruce McKellar is going to be talking about the QFP and giving you more information on that program. And again, all of these programs, all of these cost share programs, the forest management plan is kind of like the key to these programs. Without the forest management plan, you can't apply for anything. So, if you're interested in the NRCS programs, you need a management plan written. If you're interested in QFP, which is a qualified forest program, or even the commercial forest program, which is it's a little different program, but you also need a forest management plan for that. So at the end of the day, you need a forest management plan to do whatever you want to do as far as these cost share programs or the qualified forest program for your property. So you would want to get in touch with a forester and kind of go from there, and enjoy the process.
So Chris was talking about the plan is a ticket to several things, and two more things is the MEEP program. We just became MEEP certified this spring, and also joined the American Tree Farm program. So forest management plan is required for both of those. So with one management plan, it can give you several options. We decided to join the MEEP program and Tree Farm program. For one, I'm going to put the signs up at the road to show that I'm actively managing our property, sustainably managing our property. And also to see when we are encouraging our landowners to sign up for some of these programs, what all they have to go through. So we have first-hand experience in going through these programs. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Fallon and I am the coordinator of the Barry-Calhoun-Kalamazoo Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, or BCK-SISMA. My goal is to combat the threat of invasive species in the Tri-County area. Today, I will focus on invasive species that threaten the health of a woodlot. An invasive species is a two-part definition. The organism has to be both non-native and cause harm to the environment, the economy, human health, or normally a combination of the three. For example, many varieties of apple trees are not native, but they do not cause harm and we like having them. On the other hand, poison ivy, as many of you know, grows aggressively and can cause harm, but it is a native species, so it is not considered an invasive. So, giant hogweed is a native to Asia and causes severe burns. It checks both boxes and is considered an invasive species. For the purpose of definitions, a weed is simply a plant somewhere you do not want it, making any plant eligible to be considered a weed. First, I will briefly describe very common invasive species that could already be present in your forest. This is the understory plant garlic mustard. It can be managed by pulling but has a 2-year life cycle, so it would take a few years to see full management achieved. Oriental bittersweet will soon be very easy to spot because the berries stay on the vines over winter. There is also a native version, American bittersweet. To tell the difference, with Oriental bittersweet, the berries are along the entire stem, while on American, they are clustered at the end of the stems. This is invasive honeysuckle. There are a few invasive honeysuckle species and one native honeysuckle. To tell the difference, the invasive honeysuckles will be much more robust. Multiflora rose can also be identified later in the season because its small, hard, red fruits also last into the winter. Japanese barberry is still very commonly sold for landscaping. However, studies have linked barberry to increased tick populations, especially when it is in a forested area. Extremely common, autumn olive is easy to spot from far away due to the shiny-looking underside of its leaves. This is glossy buckthorn, similar to common buckthorn. Their leaves are slightly different, but they are equally invasive, so there is no need to tell them apart. This is tree of heaven. When its leaves are crushed, it smells like rotten peanut butter. Emerald ash borer. You may not see the bug very often, but I am sure you have seen the effects it has had on our ash trees. Now onto species that are not as common, but would be very detrimental if they took over your woodlot. This is black swallowwort. It is currently found in the Tri-County area. There is also pale swallowwort. Both will engulf and suffocate trees and other nearby vegetation. The only difference between the two is that black has dark purple flowers and pale has light pink flowers. Chinese yam is another vine that can take over that has also been found in the Tri-County area. It is very easily confused with bindweeds, but bindweeds have much showier flowers. The Asian longhorn beetle is not found in Michigan. I believe the closest known infestation to Michigan is in southern Ohio. The Asian longhorn beetle's favorite tree would be the maple. However, they have been known to attack many other hardwoods that are native to Michigan. This is a hemlock infected with hemlock woolly adelgid. The adelgid itself is tiny, but it leaves a white cotton-looking mass at the leaf axis on the underside of the branch. Currently, there are infestations of hemlock woolly delegate along the lakeshore of Lake Michigan. However, lots of work is currently going into containing and managing those infestations. Oak wilt is unfortunately becoming common in this area. It is a fungus that is spread via roots of nearby infected trees or by the picnic beetle. The fungus affects the tree's ability to transport water, causing it to die quickly after infestation. Once a tree is infected, there is no saving that tree, but instead you are just protecting nearby non-infected trees. Although there has been cases in white oaks, red oaks are more vulnerable. The easiest and cheapest way to manage invasive species is to never have them in the first place. To prevent invasive species infestations, decontaminate or clean gear and equipment of all seeds and vegetative material between sites. Buy firewood locally to where you plan to burn it, so live insects are not transported via the cut wood. When planting, choose native species. There have been many cases where a non-native species was recommended and then later found out to be harmful. A big example of this is autumn olive. Before active woodlot management efforts, inventory for invasives. If they are present, removing a tree and allowing more light will cause increased growth and spread, so treat the present invasives before tree removal. Even without prior invasive species present, the open disturbed lands can quickly be infested via introduction from equipment that was not decontaminated properly. Also, remember, invasive species management can be included in your woodlot plan. During management, again, make sure equipment is clean. Try to leave minimal open disturbed land and plan harvest in the winter. This is not only good for the tree health, but also to prevent the spread of oak wilt. As mentioned previously, oak wilt can be spread by the picnic beetle. The spread happens when the beetle carries the fungal spores from an infected tree to the open wound of an uninfected tree. Since the picnic beetle is only active in the summer, this vector of spread would not be an option in the winter. If accidental wounding occurs, like that caused by a storm, when the picnic beetle is active, the wound can be closed with a latex paint. Below is my contact information. Please feel free to contact me regarding any invasive species question. I will also be available during the question and answer period. Thanks!